Your body is so tired at that point that if you lay down to go to sleep, there's a high likelihood that you're either going to A, get frostbite, or B, you're just going to go to sleep and die.
Base camp, Monica, Alpenglow. Anyone copy?
Monica Pires is our doctor, and she's on the radio with us all the time. And so what she's looking for every half hour in our check-ins is words. You know, are we slurring? Are we putting sentences together correctly? She's looking for cognitive distortions, things that would indicate that something has gone wrong, or we're not receiving enough oxygen, or we're getting sick. So she's looking for, you know, how do your fingers feel? How do your toes feel? Are you nauseous? Do you have a headache? And you might have a couple of those, you know, but if you have a headache and you've got tunnel vision, and if you're starting to lose all your fingers and toes, you need to turn around.
Unfortunately, AB had to turn around a little bit earlier, so it's up to me to hold it down. That's the summit.
Last year, I tried to climb without supplemental oxygen with Cory, and I turned around about 2 hours below the summit. After a 2.5-month long expedition, I failed and ultimately came back down. I pushed for about 5 hours through this cold and shivery, and I knew things weren't right, but I kept pushing because I felt like I was in that stage that you were talking about of sort of like, you need to push through this, push through this, push through this. And then at a certain point, there was no conscious decision for me, and I think that's where it comes back to gut or instinct or 20-something years of experience in the big mountains. But there was some point that I reached to where there was no question I had to go down. I don't remember the process. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I have this red flag and this red flag and this red flag. It was just like, I got to get out of here.
So here I am, about 8,600 meters by myself. Middle of the night, suffering it out.
I get up there, and last year I got there and I was alone. You know, there were a couple people down below me, but a ways down, and I was, you know, it's all of a sudden you're just like, oh, like this is really, really far out there. I'm as high as I can get on the planet. I'm touching space. I have no oxygen. My phone died. Not that that matters, like I'm gonna call somebody, and it's like, I gotta get out of here.
At the point that Cory summited, I had made it back down to the highest camp, still at 27,000 feet, still really high, but we had a bottle of rescue oxygen there in case something went wrong, and I immediately put that oxygen on, and after 30 or 45 minutes, I started to get feeling back in my hands and my feet, and I was able to take off my gloves, my mittens, and look at my hands and think, okay, I'm not gonna lose my fingers, my girlfriend's not gonna kill me, you know, that kind of thing. And then, you know, Cory summited, came back down, and 4 hours later or 3 hours later made it back to the camp. And that was that moment of like, we're gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna go down together. Cory summited. We both have our fingers and toes. That was that moment of like joy, much more so than my past summits of the mountain. I've essentially climbed mountains in the exact same way for the past 20 years because it's always worked. And Everest for me was this place where finally I failed, and I failed completely because of myself, not because of danger or avalanches or rockfall or weather. It was just me. My body couldn't do it. And that was really powerful and kind of heartbreaking, and yet it also spurred me to see how much more I can do. What can I change?
What's fascinating about Adrian and my physiology is how different we are metabolically. Like, Where I start to demand glycogen or glucose, sugars, carbohydrates, is way, way up towards my max heart rate. Mango slices, chocolate, and even some Cliff energy blocks. So I'm eating tons of sugar, just like tons of sugar. And that's what kind of sustains my body up here. Adrian, on the other hand, where Adrian starts to demand it is sort of zone 1.5, or at least he was.
Pretty much when I'm sleeping, I'm burning glucose. I got to wake up every 2 hours and have a Snickers bar when I'm sleeping.
And he's still this skinny.
So this year, pretty much after I recovered, came home, my mind settled down a little bit from that sort of exertion of that season. My whole focus has been on training and diet. I'm essentially on a ketogenic or paleo diet, so even though I'm eating 4,000 calories a day to try to match my workout schedule, it's almost no carbohydrates.
Paulden! Hey, brother!
So we were doing a lot of interviews and everyone was asking if I was going back. The answer was like, I have no idea, no way, you know, different versions of that. And then somewhere we were in New York City and in like the 23rd interview of 2 days and my mind was completely gone and I was totally jet lagged. I was like, hell yes, I'm going back. Of course I'm going back. And Cory gave me this huge hug and it was this random interview and it just happened like that. Our main team is Cory and myself. We're climbing as, you know, this team, this independent whole as partners, but at the same time, we are partnered with my guide company, Alpenglow Expeditions, which has a group of 7 on the mountain. And together, we're supported by 7 Sherpa and 3 base camp cooks and assistants. So really, it's like 20-something people all together for 2 months on the mountain.
The reason I like to go back to this place is because it offers limitless lessons. Allegorically, if you picture it, it's the point from which all else on the planet flows. That point is the place from which everything else comes outward and downward and all sorts of, and it weaves and interconnects. And that to me is a special place to visit because if nothing else, it gives you perspective.
But also what I've found is Mount Everest, like it's this place of human struggle. You know, when you spend 2 months on that mountain, it doesn't matter who you are, a Sherpa, a guide, a professional athlete, or a client on a team. Everybody is pushed to their absolute limit, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I love being a part of a team that's partaking of that. It's powerful.
First morning at 7,000 meters. I'm breathing hard just sitting. There are a lot of different ideas about the best ways to acclimatize, but we pretty much stick to the old school, which is climb high, sleep low. So today we're going to rest here, maybe do a tiny little walk. Tomorrow try and tag 7,500 or 7,700.
We're getting out of here. Time to go rest 2 or 3 days after 2 nights up high.
So our plan is to go up for 3 nights, sleep at least 1 night at 7,700 meters, and hopefully touch 8,000 meters. Mountain's looking super beautiful today out there, just a little bit of wind on top. Right there.
So here's a little context before we get started. The FAA requires pilots in unpressurized airplanes to wear oxygen if they fly above 14,000 feet because the brain can start to lose function. That's 3,000 feet below where we begin our climb at base camp, 17,000 feet above sea level. From there, it's a 12-mile hike from base camp to advanced base camp, which in New York would take you from about Battery Park to the Bronx Zoo. At Advanced Base Camp, we sleep at 21,000 feet, which is taller than the highest peak in North America. After ABC, it's 2,000 vertical feet up to the North Col, which relatively may not sound like much, but any volunteers to take the stairs in the 1,250-foot Empire State Building? At Camp 2, 25,500 feet above sea level, we sleep at the cruising altitude of a twin-engine airplane. From there, it's up to Camp 3, 27,000 feet, which if it were a peak would be the 6th tallest mountain in the world. At that altitude, you're in what's known as the death zone, because quite simply, you are not getting enough oxygen to live. And from there, no big deal, It's a 40-hour workday to get on top and back down to safety. Suffice to say, Everest is more than a little daunting. Cory and I as partners, I think it's been a really interesting process, and it was very much an unknown actually in 2016. We had, like I said, hung out a lot together and done sort of like, oh, we're in Ouray, Colorado, a couple of ice pitches together, that kind of thing. But spending a few hours together, and here we were going to go on the biggest expedition of our lives for 2.5 months. And, I was really uncertain how it would actually work.
Adrian's defining characteristic as a partner is his ability to read me as a partner, and I think that comes from years of being a talented mountain guide, because what that requires is some emotional sensitivity, some emotional maturity and intuition, and the fact that I'm a fairly emotional human being I think can be challenging for any partner, be it a climbing partner, be it a life partner, be it whatever. I'm not always the easiest person to be around, and I think what makes him so special is he can identify those shifting moods and fill in the gaps that need to be filled in.
I think our connection and our different personalities fit quite well together in the big mountains, because people often joke that I'm a robot.
I'm more emotional, he's a little bit more, and I mean this in the most endearing way, robotic.
Cory is, I think he'd be the first one to tell you, he's a hot mess. He's just a total emotional junk show. And that's how he runs, and that's how he reaches these incredible highs. And of course, there's the other side, where sometimes he's just pissed off and down and dark and not having fun, and it's really hard for him.
When I was an adolescent, I was a straight A student. I skipped 2 years of school. Everything was kind of like going swimmingly on the straight and narrow, and then all of a sudden nothing was working, and my grade point average dropped down to like a 1.89 or something, which I think is like straight D's. And of course my parents were like, well, what's happening? So I was, they took me to see a doctor, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression and later on with bipolar disorder, and I've taken medication my entire life for those things, and I'm not shy about that, and they've saved my life, and there's no room for discussion in my life about it. But in the lead up to a trip like this, there's a tremendous amount of stress. You're packing, you're preparing, and then all of a sudden you do like a 6-day travel sequence to get to base camp. And quite frankly, it's easy to forget to take your meds. It's not something that I have ever intentionally gone off of, but when you start to miss that consistency, it's very easy for the levels to drop in your bloodstream. And so what ended up happening this year is that travel sequence took its toll, and I could not figure out why, I could barely move uphill. And when I realized, oh my God, I'm just depressed, and I'm super anxietal because of it, instantly that changed my mood, because I knew finally why I was having those problems. And bringing that to Adrian, as soon as I identified it, he was like, oh, cool, I got it, no worries.
It was a powerful moment for us, I think, to be like, hey, we are human, right? We're here to climb a mountain, but there's a lot of other stuff going on in our lives, and this is part of that. And if we're going to be good partners, we have to work through it. So it was powerful in person. It was powerful discussing whether and when to put it on Snap, and his decision to open up about that.
As a sidebar to depression, I've dealt with addiction and anxiety specifically. Today's been sort of a rough one for me, not for any particular reason other than that I get in my head about my fitness and I worry. But these days for me totally suck, and they're super discouraging, and they fill me with all sorts of questions and self-doubt. So basically, early on in the trip, I was dealing with a minor bout of depression and severe anxiety.
When I shared my struggles with depression and anxiety, I got a huge amount of personal feedback. What ends up happening when anybody in any major league sport comes out and says, hey, I deal with this, I'm just like you, it's like this great sigh of relief moves through the audience that's watching those people, because athletes get put on pedestals and people think that they're somehow different when in fact it's the same, and athletes deal with the same things every day, day in, day out. They fight with their spouses, they struggle with depression, whatever it happens to be. And so I think the more that is offered outward, the more people feel like, oh, I deal with that and I can rise up and accomplish something that I'm very proud of. Adrian's ability to not have judgment around the fact that I do have these issues and still want to continue to climb with me is very special.
I think that emotional side of him is both a strength and a weakness. Again, and some of the creativity and successes he's had, absolutely, I think, come from that same place. So I was very familiar with the background. When he had that really tough period at the beginning of the trip, I think he started by really trying to keep it to himself, not talk about it, try to figure it out, wasn't really figuring it out, and then he had this light bulb moment. And it was with the light bulb moment when he brought me in, it was like, I think this is what's happening. Like, I might need some support. I need to get this right so that we can go and do what we need to do on the mountain.
I think there's a perception that we come here and there's no fear. And the truth is that, and I don't mean this to be dramatic, I don't at all, but this is a 2-month meditation on mortality for me. And there is a huge sigh of relief when it's over, because I spend 6 to 8 weeks a year thinking about death. And I know that that's a real possibility here. And I don't balance it well. But, balancing or learning to understand the difference between fear and intuition is a lifelong process. And at 36, I don't understand it at all. Every time I come here, I feel like I'm going to die, and I have to prepare for that. And it's an exhausting process for me. I'm always scared. The only way I can describe why I keep coming back is it's analogous to love. We fall in love, we get hurt, we get broken, and then somehow we forget that and we decide to do it again. And it's one of the most irrational things that we as humans do. And I think that's what this is for me. It's love. It's just because it hurts doesn't mean I'm not going to do it again. And just because I'm scared doesn't mean I'm not going to engage with it.
We've lost so many friends because if you do this, like Cory said, 3 expeditions a year. Like, I've come to the Himalaya twice a year, every year since 1999 or whatever it is. It's like, if you keep doing that, your odds are not good.
Just the cold hard facts. I counted 7 bodies on the route this year. That's an emphatic reminder of the venue that you've decided to play in, and it's all good and it's all fun and it's all easy until it's not. And that's what happened to all those 7 people. It's a series of small mistakes that they make throughout the climb, and then they don't leave. Seeing bodies around you, it's not scary or alarming or anything like that, but it's definitely profound and for me somber, because it's like that person had a family that loved them very much, that said goodbye to them at the airport, that was certain that they were coming home, and that all would go swimmingly and nothing could happen, but it did. And I mean, there's up on the hill behind us, there's 20 or 30 memorials of people that have lost their lives on this side of the mountain, and when you decide to play here, you take on that responsibility, and it's real, and we've both lost friends.
More people died yesterday for no good reason. A lot more
people who are meant to be with quote-unquote guides making good decisions were up high on the mountain where they shouldn't be in brutal weather. It's time to take this mountain seriously. It's time to clean house. We need to start standing up for what we believe in on this mountain.
The slope between Advanced Base Camp and the North Col has had a major avalanche before where it killed a number of Sherpa. There's a serac or an ice cliff that can collapse. There's evidence of it all over the place. It's part of the climb. You have to go through it.
Both Cory and I have spent lots of time under seracs. We've seen seracs collapse. We've had near misses with seracs. By their nature, they are unpredictable.
So the point for everybody, all climbers really, is to spend as little time as possible underneath that.
You know, I nearly lost my life in an avalanche in Pakistan to one of these events that triggered a larger snow avalanche. That experience has stuck with me. Every time we leave ABC and have to go through the seracs here, as minimal as they are, it's very hard for me, and it requires a huge amount of energy for me to let go of that fear, work through it, and climb with Adrian. And certainly there is an element of catharsis when we kind of emerge out onto the North Col and it's safe.
Run through these sections quick as we can and get out of harm's way.
It's probably about 2 minutes here where we're slightly exposed to the edge of the serac.
And I remember one day specifically where there was a low cloud layer. It was snowing, it was windy, Adrian was moving faster, and I was just mortified. I was just convinced that there was some malevolent, force that was going to kill me, and I was angry. I was angry at the mountain. I was angry at myself. I was angry at trauma. I was angry at avalanches. I was angry at everything because I was so scared. And I got through it, and I got to the tent, and I sort of collapsed a little bit, and I don't remember feeling the same element of fear after that day. It was like that was 4 years of trapped, repressed anger and fear that had to be exercised.
First taste of Everest being Everest. 25,000 feet. Woo! The acclimatization process, that's where the discipline comes in. You have to put the work in. It's like the training at home. You can't short circuit that and expect to have a safe summit push. It looks so close.
Where are we at, AB?
8,000 meters.
Yeah.
Woo! Everest.
We did touch 8,000 meters. It is a huge milestone for us. That's a huge confidence booster. The fact that we were both able to sleep at 7,700 meters and feel good enough to move on the next day and actually go up and touch that altitude is a really, really good sign.
There was no doubt we'd get to 8,000 meters during our acclimatization bid, but what's nice, it's just this transition point. Now we've done, there was a huge phase before the expedition, 5 months of training. Then there was all the travel. Then there's the acclimatization phase. That's been the last month. And now that's done. Now all that's left is to make the summit push. But if you've been following our snaps, it's all about weather. And the window is coming, and it looks like it might be a needle threader.
So we started to really look at weather patterns, and I think anytime we have days upon days to think about it, it becomes harder.
I had an amazing season this season, felt so strong, felt like my diet and training had worked so well. The team was right, we were having fun, and I was just, really feeling super solid. But then we had a week to rest, which was very conscious, take a full week to rest. That's a lot of time to think as well. And definitely doubt started creeping in where it's like, well, the truth is, I felt great last year too.
I think you started to fixate on the one thing that you couldn't control, which might make it better, which was the weather.
It was something that I could pour 4 hours a day into debating and looking at every model and getting dozens more models sent to where the meteorologists were like, there's no way you could possibly need this. And I was like, but I want to look at it. I just didn't want to blow it. The other thing you guys have asked about Summit Push, it's coming up fast now. We're looking at a weather window in the late 20s of May.
the move from Camp 2, which is at 25,000 feet, to about 26,000 feet, 8,000 meters, that part was actually really scary for me. Some of the snaps show it was extremely severe weather, and to the point where I was concerned that if it had kept up like that above 8,000 meters, we would have, without oxygen, it wouldn't have been safe for us to be there.
Yeah, we knew we were going to deal with some wind getting up to 8,300 meters in order to be in position for the no-wind day, but the wind came stronger, harder. It was like furious.
Yeah.
And when you're out there with no oxygen, just, you know, the three of us climbing, Topo filming, and Cory and I, and it got really real. So emotionally, there was a toll there, I'd say.
I crossed the 8,000 meter mark, and it's almost like I feel better. It's crazy. But on that day, because we had been climbing in such severe conditions for the first half of the day, I was pretty worked.
I'm about an hour in right now, 50 minutes, feeling like total garbage. It's hard to know if I'm battling last night's sleep or what, but right now this just sucks. We moved to Camp 3 or 8-3 today and rest, but last year I didn't sleep at all, and neither did Adrian. So this morning's kind of about saddling up, getting ready for a very, very long day, a long push, conserving energy, and then giving it everything we have.
Summit Push lasts for 42 hours because you wake up not at Camp 3, you wake up at Camp 2. And you climb from Camp 2 to Camp 3. Camp 3 is so high that it's not necessary.
Yeah, it's just too dangerous.
It's unless you're on oxygen, you shouldn't be sleeping there. And even on oxygen, it's dangerous.
So I arrived into the highest camp on the mountain, 27,000 feet, Camp 3, at about 5:30 p.m. And after looking at one more set of weather forecasts and sending out our snaps and our Strava data, we decided I would leave, actually earlier than I originally planned. We decided I would leave at 11:30 p.m. Does that sound right?
That's right.
Originally, you know, as we looked at this year, one of my goals was to climb not through the night, was to actually start as close to the morning as I can, to have as few dark hours, cold hours as possible. But as we looked at the forecast, we saw the winds were coming back in the afternoon of the 27th. And so I wanted as many hours before the wind came as possible. So 11:30 p.m. was my leaving time, and we really debated whether to climb as a team or not.
It's 10:30 p.m. That guy gets to sleep a little bit more because he's faster than me. I'm having a coffee.
I wanted to climb with the team, but I also knew that there was potential that if I left with the team, I wouldn't end up climbing with the team anyway.
But the reality is, you know, so we were talking about this earlier, that Cory above 8,000 meters is faster than me, and I really expected that to be the case. And we really wanted to stand on top together this year. You know, that was part of the goal.
And ultimately, you know, this trip has always defaulted back to the most important thing is to make sure that Adrian stands on top without O's. So I defaulted to that. I let the decision be made, essentially. Yeah. You know, I said, Topo, Adrian, you guys make the call. I'll leave when you tell me. So I ended up leaving the tent 2 hours after Adrian and everybody else.
I felt awesome, and that was so different than last year. I was like dancing a little bit and getting all psyched and calling people at home and talking to Monica on the radio, and definitely like putting it out there like, wow, it feels good.
So yeah, I was just listening to where people were when it was my turn to leave, and immediately I felt I didn't feel great. I didn't feel like I was on my game as much as I have been. I didn't feel bad. Cognitively, I was completely clear. It wasn't an altitude issue. It was an overall drive issue, I think.
I think at that point I had been climbing for
6 hours.
Maybe 5 or 6 hours, yeah, and it had been the perfect night. My hands were warm, my feet were warm, which was a huge change from last year, and it was really nice just to be able to
focused. Topo and I were playing music. We were, just joking about sort of being out there and moving up. And Topo was on oxygen, of course, along with his Sherpa and my Sherpa. So they're pretty much just running circles around me while I'm suffering away. It was a great start to the day.
Ultimately, I caught up just above what's called the second step. So it's at roughly 28,500 feet. So very high, higher than any other mountain in the world.
And I actually had no idea Cory caught up to us. I never saw him. We never talked.
Well, we did briefly.
On the radio?
No, we talked.
In person?
Yeah.
What did we say?
We fist bumped.
Nice.
What's interesting is I wasn't feeling good, but by time I was on pace to summit in the same time as last year.
Definitely, and in the same time as last year, and actually exactly according to our plan. Our 2-hour buffer had been about right, that we met up at a time when hopefully you'd be able to slow to my pace and stay warm enough and summit.
We were on schedule, and I was on schedule to summit without oxygen in the same amount of time, and I just didn't have it in me. I sat down, I looked at Adrian. He doesn't remember, obviously. And I said, I don't think I have this in me, and I'm going to turn around. Consciously, I was much more arrogant and prideful. Consciously, it was about, I don't want to do this with oxygen, and I'm not capable of doing it mentally right now. Physically, yes. Mentally, no. And, but certainly there was an element of self-sacrifice that was essentially saying, if I keep going and I fail, I'm going to cost Adrian his chance, and he is so close right now, so close.
Cory made the really hard decision to turn around, not feeling it. Luckily I got Topo.
I'll give up doing it without O's if it, I don't want to do that.
I remember when Cory decided to turn around, I was super bummed because I felt like I wanted to be on top with Cory this year. We had failed at that last year, and to fail at it again felt like such a because this trip has been so much about our partnership, about what we found on this mountain together and how well we climb together and how far beyond we go from what we do individually or have done on other expeditions with other people.
I looked back over my shoulder one more time and saw Adrian and Topo moving up through the clouds, and I saw the summit, and I just knew that I was making a bad decision. It's so funny, I think back and I think about the deliberation period, and it's almost non-existent. It was just a glance over the shoulder, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place, going the wrong direction. I need to fix this.
I remember talking to Topo to relay to Monica exactly about this. Like, don't we have extra oxygen on the mountain? I know we've got a dozen extra bottles somewhere. Let's find them.
I think all of the pieces were firing back and forth, and finally it connected in my brain. Oh, I can get oxygen right now. Coincidentally, the Alpenglow Expeditions guided team was descending at exactly that time, and they sort of overtook me right at the top of the second step, and I was able to get an extra bottle of oxygen, one of our backup masks and regulators. Mingma helped me tie the bottle on as a backpack itself, and Mingma and I started climbing back up to catch up with Adrian. Alpenglow Expeditions with clients always carries extra masks and regulators to take care of multiple events should they occur. And On their way down, they had zero occurrence of any malfunction of the breathing apparatus, the masks and regs. And so we felt comfortable as a team that I could take one mask, one regulator, and one bottle of oxygen from them on descent, put it on, and make it work up and back down to that point. It was incredibly fortuitous timing. Had it been 15 minutes later,
They would have been gone.
the team would have been gone, and I would have had no chance of putting on oxygen and coming up. It was meant to be. Climbing with oxygen, climbing without oxygen is like comparing apples to sheetrock. It's like two different things. It's two different sports. It's not even I put on oxygen and all of a sudden I'm completely warm. It's like feeling this warm, fuzzy blanket spread through your insides, and all of a sudden all the energy that you thought you didn't have, you have again, and your pace increases 2- or 3-fold. Oxygen at elevation is the single greatest, performance enhancing drug there is.
It was also at a time where, I had been going probably at that point, let's say for 8 hours, and it was getting really, really hard.
Adrian was hitting a wall. I mean, it was obvious, and that's totally normal. So the team needed an injection of energy.
And I remember being totally psyched. Like, this is what I wanted all along. It just, all of a sudden, it was like, of course we're all gonna stand on top. And to have this new injection of energy where Cory came back up on oxygen and was, pelvis thrusting and fist bumping and just like, we're doing this. We are totally doing this. It was maybe the best moment of my climb.
I mean, it's first and foremost about accomplishing the goal together. Secondarily, it was just about doing what I love. And there was I saw also a missed opportunity there to be with friends in the mountains, the place that I love most. And I didn't want to let that pass. And I also felt, without sounding too woo-woo, I felt a very welcoming sense from the environment at that point. Despite the fact that we were climbing in a cloud, it just felt like it was safe. Like it was a safe place for me to be, and it needed to happen the way it was happening, and I needed to go back up.
The wind had started. The last 10 or 15 meters to the summit of this very low angle snow slope, and they were devastating for me. It was so hard to figure out how to continue walking. I was actually up there yelling at myself and punching myself in the thigh, trying to make my legs keep working.
I'm all about ABME. Good, great to hear. How are your toes? Yeah, everything's good. Okay, great. You both sound awesome.
Topo and I I don't want to say we were lying to Monica about Adrian's condition, but we were simplifying it and omitting a little bit. What Topo and I were doing was observing Adrian's actions and bouncing them off each other and saying, well, he seems, yes, his speech is slightly slurred. It's thick. But that's pretty normal for everybody. That can happen with cold too. He seems to be completely lucid, but not energetic. So we were just balancing everything, and then we'd sort of condense all of that and give Monica a report and keep him off the radio as much as we could. And the reason is because if we gave her every detail, she would have told Adrian to turn around hours before. But unless you're with, in this case, a patient, right? I mean, that's what she's looking at this as, it's impossible to make a diagnosis.
Tell me if I have to come down.
Listen to me and I tell you to come down.
You know I will. Monica's been my expedition doctor since 2007 on every single expedition that I've been on. She is our brain up there. We decide to give up some of our autonomy
to her
Discretion.
more rational, and more rational decision making down here, where she doesn't feel the emotion of, for instance, me being up there saying, I'm not turning around.
No, you never said that. In fact, you looked at topo and you said, and this was at about 28,980 feet. I mean, we're really close to the summit, and you said, if you told me to turn around right now, I would. But if Monica tells me to turn around, I need you to run cover for me, essentially.
Had I been alone, I think I would have turned around. Like, I'm pretty solid in how much I love life. But having these guys there, knowing I had support, being okay with having support, not that anyone could carry me down if I sat down. If I sat down, I was gonna die. But knowing that I had people to cajole me, yell at me, manage the weather and other things around me so I could just focus on that next step, up or down, it gave me a confidence, certainly, to keep going.
Adrian fought for his. He fought so hard. He fought harder than I've ever seen anybody fight for anything. And it was one of the most beautiful, profound, and moving things I've ever witnessed. I wouldn't have done it. If I had, there's absolutely no way. I've never tried that hard at anything in my life ever, but you cannot get dragged to the top of Everest, and every single step you take is your own, and I've never seen anybody fight so hard for anything in my life, and it's one of the most stunning displays of mental fortitude and emotional and physical perseverance I think I've ever, definitely witnessed, but even heard about, you know?
Thanks, man. And it got to the point where for the last 10 meters, Paulden, my Sherpa, actually tied a rope between the two of us just to try to encourage me to keep moving. There's no dragging anyone to the summit around here or anything like that, and there was no danger in that terrain of me falling, but I think he decided I needed something to keep motivating me, and feeling him on the other end of the rope. There's something very powerful there. So my struggle was so hard to get to the top that I remember getting to the top, sitting down. I had the wherewithal to take 3 snaps, and I did nothing else.
I hope this counts as snapping from the summit. Cory Richards right there. Summit. Man, I can't believe I did it. Just so gripped right now. Took every Sherpa we had. Cory's help on oxygen. This is summit. Peace. Love the out of you guys.
I had no moment of enlightenment. I don't even think I got to hug these guys, because that would have meant standing up, and that was not happening up there. And I was scared. I wasn't scared for the weather. There was no conscious thing that I was like, this is wrong, we're in trouble. But the level of exhaustion that I had was so deep that I knew getting down was going to be really hard.
Ladies and gentlemen, not only is my phone not dead, but that is Adrian Ballinger with no oxygen on the top of the world. Yeah, baby. Here we are. 1 year later, you did it. Yeah.
The plan on this side of the mountain, when you climb to the summit with or without oxygen, in my opinion, should always be to get back down to advanced base camp. And the reason for that is that you've taxed your body so tremendously hard that the safest place you can be is as low as you can be. And the lowest place you can be that you can get to readily is advanced base camp at 21,000 feet. So that should always be your goal. Going back to Camp 3 at 8,300 meters or 27,000 feet is just stupid, because your body is so tired at that point that if you lay down to go to sleep, there's a high likelihood that you're either going to A, get frostbite, or B, you're just going to go to sleep and die.
Getting down was actually far harder than I thought it would be, mostly because of true, I think, mental exhaustion. We would have to take breaks at a certain point because people would be rappelling the ropes, wanting to put time, and I would sit down, of course, because there was no way I was standing if I didn't have to, and I would just fall dead asleep, completely asleep. So I'm at 29,000 feet, and asleep.
But that's where people die.
So whether it was Paulden at some point during the day, or Topo shifting from filming to being like, come on, Adrian, like, time to wake up, let's go, or Cory, like I had people around me to help, you know, bring me back and be like, you've got work to do. This is not the time to take a nap. And I'd wake up and be like, well, I think they're right. I should probably not nap right now. And then like there was no decision making at the tents. We didn't know where we were gonna stop. It was like, we passed 8,300 or got to 8,300 and it was like, I'll die if I sleep in that tent, so we're gonna keep going. And then we got to 7,700 and we had this really weird mid-altitude wind, and the tents at 7,700 at 25,000 feet were just all being destroyed. Broken poles, you know, just being decimated. It was like, well, there's no way I'm stopping there. It doesn't matter how tired I am. I could stop every 5 meters, but I'm not sleeping there. And then by the time we got to 7,000 feet and it was dark and we're with headlamps and, you know, the whole thing, and it's 8 p.m. It's like, well, now I know if I stop here, I have to fire up a stove, I have to make water, I have to try to figure out how not to get frostbite, because 7,000 meters for me personally is still really, really cold and my body is devastated. I've had half a liter of water in the past 30 hours. Like, there's just no way. And so we kept going. And on the way back, once we got off the last fixed rope, it's still a 45-minute walk to camp, but there's no danger there. I literally was sitting down and falling asleep every 5 minutes or so. But I knew that at the end, at the ABC, not only was Cory there, but there was hot water there. And that's all I wanted, was hot water and heat.
Hot water, a bed, and safety, and people that care, and people that can look after somebody who's put themselves that far out, you know. Monica's great at that. She assumes the role of the mother and she takes care of us, and she immediately, you know, got Adrian warm and got him some water, and you know, that's truly when the sigh of relief comes. When everybody goes, okay, we got away with it this time. We did it, you know, like, we got away with it, and it took a tremendous amount of manpower and energy, but we did it together, and we're safe now. And that's the collective sigh of relief that comes. It's the out breath after Everest without oxygen.